feel like I'm sitting down for an interview, like the start of one of those true crime documentaries. Anyway, hey guys, it's been a little while since I did a YouTube video of any kind. I actually got the inspiration for this video from my TikTok. I do a lot of lives on there now. I do a lot of content on there now. This is one of the reasons why my YouTube has been a bit neglected, shall we say. The subject of this video is one of the questions that I've been asked a lot, and that's how did I get into witchcraft? I never really realised that I haven't talked much about it on here. I haven't made a dedicated video explaining my journey, my path. So let's get into it. As some of you might already know, I was brought up Christian from the ages of as soon as I was born till about 12. I was a Protestant Christian. I was christened, like legitimately christened in a church when I was 3, which might be hard to believe for some people who know me in real life. The concept of witchcraft as a thing was definitely not on my radar for the earlier part of my life. I truly believed in God, Christian heaven and hell, and the devil, all of those things up until the age of 12. Everyone in my family is a Christian to some degree. One thing I have to be clear about though is I was very lucky with the Christians that I surrounded myself with. My family have never been intense Christians. They all believe and they have their faith, but they've never tried to force their beliefs and their religion on me. I went to a church primary school from the ages of 5 until I was about 11. I went to church every Wednesday in school, like we'd take time off lessons to go to church, do the hymns and all of that. And I truly believed in it all until I was 12. But then something traumatic happened to me when I was 12, something traumatic for most of our family, and I'm not going to get into it because it's quite personal. That really stopped me believing because I just couldn't understand as like a young preteen person why God would do something like that. So it really shook my faith, and I haven't believed in God or Christianity ever since. Now, I didn't start using social media until I was 13. It was still a very, very new concept when I was a teenager. The way that you all have it now, it was definitely not like that 10, 12 years ago. But I was starting to see a lot of things about Christianity that didn't align with me. My attitude towards Christianity, now that I'm an adult, has changed considerably from when I was a teenager. Even in my early 20s, it's changed considerably. I used to have a real problem with it. And while I still do have a problem with it, I see it with a bit more clarity now. My problem has never been faith. I think if people have faith, then that's absolutely beautiful. But I have a super big problem with organized religion. But that's not what we're getting into today. When I was about 15/16, I think I was in my last year of high school. I might have been in year 10 though. I went over my friend's house and we just spent the night watching films and just having fun. My friend had a set of tarot cards and I'd never heard of tarot cards before this point. So when I say that I've been into and using tarot for a long time, I mean I've been using it on and off since I was about 16. This time I was over my friend's house, she was doing a year in review reading. So when you use one card for each month, she did one of them on me. And I wish I wrote it down at the time because I can't remember any of it now. But I really enjoyed that, and I think that was my first run-in with witchcraft, but I didn't know. A couple of months later, I was chilling at home, still 16, still in school. I used to be on the internet a lot and just looking up things on social media, but I was looking online and I came across witchcraft as a thing. And I was really interested because I've always felt out of place. I've always felt a bit like the black sheep, even in my family. I was looking at witchcraft as a thing and I was like, this is really cool. I didn't know that this was a real thing. I thought witchcraft was shooting fire out of your hands and riding on a broom. What we all think it is. If you're a witch, you're going to go to hell, blah, 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 blah. I was looking into it and I was reading about Wicca. Now, at the time, I didn't know that you don't have to be Wiccan to be a witch. No one told me that. I didn't have the access that people have today. I didn't have social media influences and people to tell me these things. I kind of just set it aside. I mean, I was 16 as well, and 16's a bit young to be committing to witchcraft, at least in my opinion. One of the things I remember reading actually was you should trial being a witch for a year, which I do agree with, and you shouldn't really commit to it until you're 18, so a consenting adult. And to be honest, I agree with most of that. It doesn't mean you can't try it out younger, but I think you're too young to truly commit to it because witchcraft is a lifelong commitment and lifestyle. I didn't know that at the time. So I just set it aside because I was like, well, if I have to be religious, because Wicca's always given me mad religion vibes, if you know what I mean. It seemed like you had to believe in a deity as well. Like all this information I was given, this misinformation, just put me off of it. So I set aside. Witchcraft's always just come into my life in like really subtle ways. Even when I'm not looking for it, it's appeared. So then when I was 18, I was living in a part of the city I didn't really want to be living in a situation I didn't fully want to be in. I started looking into witchcraft again, and I ended up making a book of shadows. My partner at the time wanted a book of shadows, so I said I'd design it for him and I'd write in all the herb correspondences for him. It was more a grimoire really, but he was calling it a book of shadows. But, you know, whatever. I didn't know what I was talking about, so I just went along with it. I really enjoyed like writing all of these herbs down and looking into like moon phases and astrological things. I ended up looking into witchcraft again. I also done a couple of extra tarot readings in between here and there. From 17 to 18, I was in very weird situations. I squatted for like a lot of that time. I lived in squats, and I came across some very interesting people. So I made this book of shadows, and then I started looking into witchcraft really subtly. But it wasn't until I was about 19 that it really like set itself for me. I met another person who ended up being a partner, and they were really into spiritual energy. My transfer went from traditional Wiccan practices to more Eastern spiritual traditions. Through my then partner at that time when I was 19, I met some other people who were really into Eastern traditions. And I got into crystals, I got into meditation, I got into, you know, all of that stuff that most of us spiritual people do when we're first getting into it. I got my first personal tarot deck, but I never ever vibed with that tarot deck. I used it like a couple of times, and every time I just felt no connection to it. Now, the issue I had with Eastern, it wasn't Eastern traditions, it was the New Age spirituality. Let's nip that in the bud right now. New Age spirituality, especially with social media, because at this time social media was way more established. It really put me off. Since I was 15, I've suffered with depression and anxiety. I still suffer with both, but anxiety is a lot worse than my depression now, and I can manage both in a much better way. But New Age spirituality really put me off a lot of everything, because I was under the impression that because I wasn't positive all the time, that meant that I couldn't practice these things. It really alienated me, and I talk a lot about mental health on my channel. I talk a lot about mental health on all of my platforms, really, because I am of the firm belief that just because you're depressed or you have a mental illness, that does not mean you can't be spiritual. Some of the most spiritual people in the world have battled really harsh mental issues and mental health problems. They became spiritual from their mental illness. You'll find most people turn to spirituality and witchcraft because of the mental illness. They don't know where else to go, and they come across it because it gives them a release. It gives them somewhere to escape and learn about themselves in a healthier way. So I'm a firm believer that you can be spiritual, and you can do spiritual things even if you're suffering from negative mental health. You can't be positive all the time. It's simply impossible. If you were positive all the time, you'd never appreciate being positive. I made a tea. Delicious. So I felt really alienated from New Age spiritual movement, but I still practiced and endured. But during this time, I got back into witchcraft, because witchcraft is a lot darker than New Age spirituality, at least in my opinion. I work better with dark energy, and I've said this to people so many times. It's important to know that just because you work better with dark energy, that doesn't make you a dark person. This is where the misconception comes in. I believe that if you're in a good place mentally and you know what you're doing, working with dark energy is incredibly beneficial. You can transmute that dark energy into something positive and use it to help other people. I ended up buying a new tarot deck. I remember that. I don't remember exactly when, but I bought a new one. I just got the standard Rider-Waite deck, you know, the classic one that everyone gets, and I felt an instant connection to that one. I absolutely loved tarot then. I got into sigil craft. I absolutely love to make sigils. I continued with meditation. I did a lot of crystal work, got a lot of crystals, you know, most of the cliche things that you do when you first start witchcraft. Bear in mind as well, TikTok was not a thing at this point. TikTok's only really been a thing, I'm not even sure if it's been a thing for 5 years at this point in time. And I'm 28 now, so just to give you a bit of time frame, we still had like Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, you know, all of those ones. I just think things weren't as accessible as they are now. TikTok over lockdown especially really changed the game for a lot of the way information was being pushed out. And I ended up celebrating the Sabbats for the first time. I found out what the Sabbats were. This Sabbat I ever celebrated was Mabon, and that's why Mabon's got such a close place in my heart. I remember for my first Mabon, I was at home, and I went for a walk in my local park, and my local park is trash, like it's not very good. I went to collect some autumnal leaves, so anything that wasn't the colour green, to make a little circle with them out in my garden. I put some of my crystals on it, and I just sat with them and like sort of meditated, but sort of was just appreciating the changing of the seasons. And then I decided that I wanted to make an apple crumble, because apples are great for Mabon, as we all know. That really solidified and made me feel confident enough to be like, yeah, I think I can safely say I'm a witch now. It wasn't until like 2 or 3 years into being a witch I was comfortable calling myself a witch. When I first started witchcraft, I called myself a cosmic witch, which is weird because I don't really work with astrology. I know bits and pieces, but it's not my forte. I think I just liked it because it had the word cosmic in. Then I went over to Green Witch, then Eclectic Witch. The path's always changing. Over time, I learned how to cast circles, and I used to go out on adventures with my best friend, and we started doing group circles. I remember one time another one of our friends joined in and took her out to the woods, and the three of us did a group circle together. I got to lead that circle as well. I've led quite a few circles now, and I absolutely love doing it. It just feels so right, and I love casting circles just in general. I've just been comfortably in this witch bubble for a long time. It wasn't until my late teens that I worked out that I was a witch, but it's always been there. Like even as a child, when I was still very much Christian, I always liked mystical things more. I've been super into fantasy and science fiction my whole life. I've always just been drawn to like oddities and weird things. But sometimes I'll see like 13, 14-year-olds on TikTok, and they're just learning about witchcraft now, and they're getting to learn from people like me and other people who experience witchcraft and have been witches for a long time. And it's nice that we get to share our knowledge with them, because we just didn't have it at that age. There were no platforms for us to share these things properly. I existed in my eclectic witch bubble for a very, very long time. It was only 2 years ago I went to Glastonbury for the very first time. Changed my life. I was determined to leave with a book. I didn't know what the book was. I just knew that there was a book somewhere in one of those shops waiting for me to take home. The book that I found was Hedge by Joanna Vanderhoven. This book changed my life for the better. It was through this book, even though it's about hedge druidry, I think it's very similar to hedge witchcraft. It was through this book I learnt that I was a hedge witch, and it finally made sense, because I love space and the earth pretty much equally. I've always felt like I've existed somewhere in between everything all the time. Liminality of hedge witches and hedge witchcraft is really what drew me to the path. I did try and stylize myself as a druid for a bit, but that just didn't feel like me. I tried to go without the label for a bit, but again, that didn't feel like me. I don't think labels are bad. I think when they're used positively, they're really good, and I've always felt better when I've had a label to attach myself with. I know lots of people don't like to use labels in their craft, and that's fine, but I do, and I'm totally okay with that. Discovering that I was a hedge witch, I was already like 6-7 years deep into my craft by this point, and it was only then that after getting that book from Glastonbury, I was like, wow, I think this is the path I'm meant to be going on. I get to work with nature, I get to work with liminal spaces, I get an eclectic way of learning my craft and practicing my craft, but I get to make my own rules. I do practice very non-traditionally. If you're looking for a traditional witchy mentor, I might not be the best person. But if you want to know about non-traditional stuff, then you're in the right place. I've always had a problem with following like strict dogmas and hierarchies. I've always been a little bit rebellious in nature, even after maturing. And so then I really got into the hedge witchcraft path. Started doing deep shadow work. Like, I thought I did shadow work before, but I didn't understand it the last time, and then I started doing it and properly understanding it, and now my life is much better because of it. I've used circles in witchcraft to manifest jobs. I've used them to manifest just things in general, and it works. Witchcraft has been a saving grace to me, and it's always been in my life in one way or another, even if I haven't been consciously aware of it. I think regardless how old you are when you get into witchcraft and you start down your path, if you're meant to find it, it's going to find you. And there will be subtle things that you'll only realize in hindsight were pushing you onto that path. There's some people who don't start practicing until they're in their 50s. There's no linear or set time for, like, you don't have to be young to be a witch. It's ridiculous. I just think everyone who is meant to go down a witchy path, there's always going to be signs and signals that it was there from like the beginning of your life, even if you don't know it at the time. And now, since about March, I've been in a place where I feel confident enough to impart some of my experience onto newer practitioners. And a big reason why I do it is because when I first started witchcraft, right up until now, I've never had a mentor or a teacher. It makes me quite sad, to be honest, because I have to learn everything through articles and books, which that's a big part of witchcraft. I'm not going to deny it, and that's part of the reason why we enjoy it. But, you know, back in the day and in a more traditional setting, an elder would have taught me how to do this, but I've spoken about this in another video. I always just wish that there was someone I could turn to. So the whole point that I do these things on TikTok and Instagram is for those newer witches who are feeling a bit lost. We're in a much more accessible age for social media, and there's lots of toxic shit that goes on. And I want to be a real voice to help people. I don't want to be all peace, love, and good vibes, because that's not what witchcraft is. It's not what spirituality is. So many more layers to it than that. And I want to be an authentic voice to cut through the bullshit for these people, to help them on their path with just the basics. Because when you have confidence over the basics, you can go and look into the research easier and more confidently within yourself. So in a way, I've sort of become a mentor myself, but in the most relaxed way possible. I'm just here now to help other witches along their path while I experience my own path. Even just people who are just interested in the concept, to be honest. And it was through witchcraft that I learned how cool the country that I'm from and was born in is. Before witchcraft, I thought Wales was really lame. We are from a very magical place. And I wouldn't have learned that without witchcraft. Our folklore is insane. I've been looking into our folklore a lot in the last 2.5 years, and our folklore is good. I talk about that on my TikTok sometimes. The risk of babbling on like I always do, guys. This was just a little insight into how witchcraft came to be into my life and where I am with it now, I guess. I feel like I've abandoned my channel a bit for TikTok, and I want to start uploading longer form content here for those who do want to hear it. And people keep asking me this question on my TikTok live, so I thought I'd just address it in a longer form. Witchcraft has been my saving grace. I've always been a witch, I just didn't know. And I promise you that most of you who are probably watching this is probably what's going to happen to you. Witchcraft is probably waiting for you to be ready. Or you're just interested in this video. But if you watched all of this, blessed be, guys, and thank you so much. I will be uploading more again real soon. And I hope you enjoyed hearing about my journey as a witch. We'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye bye, guys.